Welcome to sixth grade math. You ready for the lesson? The measurement table shows the fractions of 1 hour for different minutes. Write each fraction in simplest form. So if we have 1/60th, that's already in simplest form. 5 minutes is 5 over 60, and 5 is the greatest common factor, so we can divide 5 by 5 and get 1, and 60 by 5 and get 12. 10 minutes, we have 10 over 60, and we can divide 10 into 10 and get 1, and 10 into 60 and get 6. 15 minutes is 15 over 60, so that's 15 minutes over 60 minutes. And if we simplify that, 15 will go into 15 once, and 15 will go into 60 4 times. Then we have 20 minutes, which is 20 over 60, and the greatest common factor is 20. So 20 will go into 20 once, and 20 will go into 60 3 times. 30 minutes is 30 over 60. 30 is the greatest common factor. 30 will go into 30 once, 30 will go into 60 twice. And then we have 45 minutes. 45 over 60. Greatest common factor is 15. 15 goes into 45 3 times and goes into 60 4 times. What fraction of 1 hour is equal to the sum of 15 minutes and 20 minutes? Write in simplest form. So we need to write a addition problem. 15 60ths plus 20 60ths equals 35 60ths. The greatest common factor is 5, so we're going to end up with 7 over 12, because 35 divided by 5 is 7, 60 divided by 5 is 12. Explain why 1/6 hour plus 1/3 hour equals 1/2 hour. 1/6 of 1 hour equals 10 minutes. 1/3 of 1 hour equals 20 minutes. 10 minutes plus 20 minutes equals 30 minutes. And 30 over 60 equals 1/2 of an hour. Explain why 1/12 of an hour plus 1/2 hour equals 7/12 hour. So 1/12 of an hour equals 5 minutes. 1/2 of an hour equals 30 minutes. And 5 minutes plus 30 minutes equals 35 minutes. 35 over 60 equals 7/12 of an hour. Scaffolding questions. Write what fraction of 1 hour is equal to the sum of 30 minutes plus 10 minutes? So find the value of 30 minutes as a fraction of an hour. And 30 minutes times 1 over 60 equals 30 over 60. Find the value of 10 minutes as a fraction of an hour. So we have 10 minutes times 1 over 60 equals 10 60ths. And find the total value of the time. So 30 over 60 plus 10 over 60 equals 40 60ths. What is 40 60ths in simplest form? 2/3, because the greatest common factor is 20. So 20 goes into 40 twice, and 20 goes into 60 3 times. Add or subtract unlike fractions. So yesterday we discussed like fractions and how the denominators are the same. So now we're going to talk about unlike fractions and unlike denominators. So rename the fractions using the least common denominator. And the least common denominator, or LCD, is the least common multiple, or LCM, of the denominator of 2 or more fractions. Add or subtract as with like fractions. And if necessary, simplify the sum or difference. So we're going to add unlike fractions, and 1/2 plus 4 are unlike fractions because the denominators 2 and 4 are different. So method 1 is we'll use a model. So 1/2 equals 1 out of 2, and 1/4 equals 1 out of 4. So if we add them together, we get 3/4. And to use the least common denominator, 1/2 the LCD, or least common denominator, of 1/2 and 1/4 is 4. Hopefully you see that the least common multiple of 2 and 4 is 4, because 4 is a multiple of 2, and the least common denominator is the least common multiple in the denominator. So if we write the problem, 1/2 plus 1/4, we need to change the 1/2 so that we have like denominators. So we're going to multiply the denominator of 2 times 2 so that it becomes 4. And if we multiply the denominator by 2, we have to multiply the numerator by 2. And then down below, I just showed you that we're multiplying 1/4 times 1 over 1, which is the identity property of multiplication because it stays 1/4. So our new problem is 2/4 plus 1/4, and if we add the fractions, we get 3/4. We add the numerators, 2 plus 1 to get 3, and we don't add the denominator. That stays as 4. Add unlike fractions. Find 1/6 plus 2/3. Well, method 1, we'll use a model. 1/6, so we have 1 out of 6 shaded. Then we have 2/3, so we have 2 out of the 3/3 shaded, and that equals 5/6. And there is the graphic representation when we changed all of the rectangle to 6. Notice that 4 of the 6 line up with 2/3. 4/6 would be an equivalent fraction to 2/3. Method 2, using the least common denominator. We need to find the least common denominator of 1/6 and 2/3. Hopefully you see that 6 is a multiple of 3, so that will be our least common denominator. And if we write the problem, 1/6 plus 2/3, we need to convert 1/6 into a fraction, an equivalent fraction. So we don't. 1/6 will stay 1/6. So if we multiply 1 times 1 and 6 times 1, we will end up with 1/6 still. But 2/3 we do have to rewrite as an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 6. So we have to multiply the denominator 3 times 2 to get 6. So we're going to multiply the numerator as well, and we will get 1/6 plus 4/6, and then when we add the fractions, we get 5/6. And remember, we add the numerators, not the denominators. 9/10 plus 1/2. The least common denominator of 9/10 and 1/2 is 10, and that's because 10 is a multiple of 2, so it's going to be the least common multiple. And remember, the least common denominator is the least common multiple in the denominator. So write the problem. We have 9/10 plus 1/2. 9/10 is going to be fine. We don't need to change that fraction because it already has a denominator of 10. So we will use the identity property, multiply 9 times 1 and 10 times 1. And you'll see that that will leave us with 9/10. We do, however, have to rewrite 1/2 as an equivalent fraction with 10 in the denominator. So in order to do that, we need to multiply the denominator 2 times 5. And whatever we do to the denominator, we have to do it to the numerator. So we are going to multiply the numerator and denominator times 5. And we will get 9/10 plus 5/10. And that will equal 14/10. And we added the numerators, not the denominators. Now 14/10 is an improper fraction. It also can be simplified. So if we divide 14 and 10 by 2, we get 7/5. And then we can simplify it again by turning it or changing it from an improper fraction to a mixed number. Find 1/4 plus 3/8. So the least common denominator of 1/4 and 3/8 is 8, because 8 is a multiple of 4. It is the least common multiple of 4 and 8. And the least common multiple is the least common denominator. So write the problem, 1/4 plus 3/8. We need to rewrite 1/4 as an equivalent fraction with 8 in the denominator. In order to do that, we're going to multiply the numerator and denominator times 2. And 3/8 is fine the way it is. We'll use identity property to multiply it times 1. And if we multiply 1/4 times 2 over 2, we get 2/8 plus 3/8. And if we add those together, we get 5/8. And just a reminder, that we do add the numerators, but not the denominators. Find 2/3 minus 1/2. Use a model. So we're going to 2/3 is represented by shading in 2 out of the 3 squares in this rectangle, and minus 1/2. So now we're going to have a rectangle that's divided into halves, and we get 1/6. Now, how do we know that? Because if we were to take and divide those each into 6, we would end up with 1/6 left over. Now, we'll do it mathematically using the least common denominator. And the least common denominator of 2/3 and 1/2 is 6. In this case, the denominators 2 and 3 are both prime, so we can multiply them times each other to find our least common denominator. So if we rewrite the problem, 2/3 minus 1/2, we are going to have to rewrite both fractions into equivalent fractions with 6 in the denominator. So in order to turn 2/3 into an equivalent fraction with 6 in the denominator, we need to multiply the numerator and denominator times 2. And for 1/2, we need to multiply the numerator and denominator times 3, so that we end up with an equivalent fraction with 6 in the denominator. So 2/3 times 2/2 equals 4/6, and 1/2 times 3/3 equals 3/6. So we have 4/6 minus 3/6, and we're going to have 4/6 minus 3/6 equals 1/6 because we subtract the numerators but not the denominators. Find 5/8 minus 1/4. Using a model, we have 5/8 shaded in, and then we're going to have 1/4 shaded in. And if we were to subtract that, we would end up with 3/8. So if we do it mathematically with the least common denominator of 5/8 and 1/4 is 8, because 8 is a multiple of 4 and 8. And write the problem. We have 5/8 minus 1/4. 5/8 we do not have to change. We can, however, multiply it times 1/1, or 1, to get 5/8. And 1/4 we do need to rewrite as an equivalent fraction with 8 in the denominator. And in order to do that, we're going to multiply 1 times 2 and 4 times 2, and we will get 5/8 minus 2/8. And if we subtract that, 5 minus 2 is 3. We subtract the numerators, not the denominators. Find 3/4 minus 1/3. Find the LCD of 3/4 and 1/3 is 12. So the least common denominator is 12. And if we write the problem, 3/4 minus 1/3, we do need to rewrite both fractions as equivalent fractions with 12 in the denominators. So in order to get 4 to 12, we need to multiply it times 3. So we will multiply numerator and denominator times 3. And in order to get the denominator 3 to 12, we need to multiply it times 4. So we will multiply the numerator and denominator times 4. Now, 3 times 3 is 9, 3 times 4 is 12, and 1 times 4 is 4, 3 times 4 is 12. So we now have a subtraction problem of 9/12 minus 4/12. We subtract 4 from 9, we get 5/12, and that's because we subtract the numerator, not the denominators. And 1/2 minus 2/5. The least common denominator of 1/2 and 2/5 is 10. Hopefully you recognize that 10 is a multiple of both 2 and 5, and that 2 and 5 are both prime numbers, so we can find the least common denominator very quickly by multiplying those together and getting 10. Write the problem. 1/2 minus 2/5. We are going to need to rewrite both of these fractions as equivalent fractions with 10 in the denominator. So in order to do that, 2 times 5 is 10, so we multiply the numerator as well. And then 5 times 2 is 10, so we'll multiply the numerator as well. If we multiply those out, we get 5/10 minus 4/10, and our subtraction is 5 minus 4 is 1, because we subtract the numerator, but not the denominator. Real world example. Use a table to find the fraction of population that has type A or type B blood. So type A is 21/50, and type B is 1/10. And when it says or, that's an addition problem, because we're looking for either result, somebody who either has A or has B. The least common denominator of 21/50ths and 1/10 is 50. And since we're adding those together, we do need to find that. So if we write the problem, 21/50ths, we're going to be able to leave that fraction alone. But we do need to rewrite 1/10 to an equivalent fraction with 50 in the denominator, which would be 10 times 5. So we will write 10 times 5 in the denominator. Whatever we do to the denominator, we do to the numerator. So we're going to multiply the numerator times 5 as well. And if we extend that out, 21/50ths plus 5/50ths, and if we do the maths, we end up with 26/50 because we added the numerators together. We did not add the denominators. So 26/50ths is not simplified. So if we divide by 2, we get 13/25. So 13/25ths of the population has A or type B blood. Check your understanding survey. The table shows the results of an online survey of over 36,000 youth. How much greater was the part of youth that said their favorite way to be artsy was by drawing than by acting? So we're trying to find a difference because we're trying to find how much more said they would rather draw than act. So we'll have 8/25ths in drawing minus the 7/50ths in acting. And we will need to find a common denominator. And this one will be 50 because 50 is a multiple of 25. So it's the least common multiple of 25 and 50. And the least common multiple in the denominator is the least common denominator. So we have to rewrite 8/25ths to an equivalent fraction with 50 in the denominator. We will multiply 25 times 2, so we will have to multiply 8 times 2. And then 7/50ths is fine. So since we're doing math above, we'll just multiply, we'll use the identity property, multiply 7/50ths times 1, which can be 1/1. And we'll end up with 16/50ths minus 7/50ths. And if we do the math, 16 minus 7 is 9/50. We subtracted the numerators, but not the denominators. Evaluate an expression with fractions. Algebra, evaluate A minus B if A equals 3/4 and B equals 1/6. So all we have to do here is plug in 3/4 for A and 1/6 for B, and we have our new expression of 3/4 minus 1/6. Now we need to find the least common denominator. Least common denominator of 4 and 6 is 12. So in order to get 4 to 12, we need to multiply 4 times 3. And to get 6 to 12, we multiply 6 times 2. Whatever we do to the denominators, we do to the numerators. So we end up with 9/12 minus 2/12. And if we subtract the numerators, we get 9 minus 2 is 7, or 7/12. Check your progress. Evaluate C plus D if C equals 2/5 and D equals 3/10. So C plus D. And all we're going to do is plug in 2/5 for C and 3/10 for D. We get a new expression of 2/5 plus 3/10. And now we need to find the least common denominator. 10 is a multiple of 5, so 10 is the least common multiple of 10 and 5. And the least common multiple here, the least common denominator is the least common multiple of the denominator. So we have 2 times 5 is 10, 2 times 2 is 4, and 3 times 1 and 10 times 1, since 3/10 is already fine. If we add 4 and 3, in the numerator, we get 7/10. Additional examples, find 3/4 plus 1/5. The least common denominator of 3/4 and 1/5 is 20. So write the problem, 3/4 plus 1/5. We need to turn 3/4 into an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 20. So we will multiply 4 times 5, and therefore 3 times 5. And we need to turn 1/5 into an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 20. So we will multiply 5 times 4, and therefore 1 times 4. So if we multiply those out, we get 15/20, and we get plus 4/20. And then if we do the math, we add 15 and 4 to get 19/20, and that should be in its simplest form. Remember, we got 19 because we added 15 and 4. We added the numerators, and we don't add the denominators. 3/5 minus 1/6. The least common denominator of 3/5 and 1/6 is 30. So if we write the problem, 3/5 minus 1/6, we need to change both fractions into equivalent fractions with a denominator of 30. So 5 times 6 is 30. So 3 times 6 is the numerator. And then 1/6, we're going to do 6 times 5 to get 30. So that we also have to multiply 1 times 5. And if we multiply that out, we get 18/30 minus 5/30. And then if we do the math, we're going to subtract 5 from 18, which will give us 13/30. And we subtract the numerators, not the denominators. Pet adoption. Use a table to find the fraction of adopted dogs in one town that are either golden retrievers or mixed breed. So here's our table, and we need to find that are either golden retrievers. So golden retrievers are 7/25, or mixed breed, and the mixed breed is 2/5. So we have 7/25 plus 2/5, and we need to find the least common denominator. So 25 is a multiple of 5, so that will be our least common multiple or least common denominator. And if we write the problem, we have 7/25 plus 2/5. 7/25 we can leave the same, so we use the identity property to multiply times 1 or 1 over 1. And we need to multiply 5 times 5 to get 25, so we'll multiply 2 times 5. And we get 7/25 plus 10/25, and if we add that up, that gives us 17/25. And we added the numerators, but not the denominators. So 17/25 of the adopted dogs are golden retrievers or mixed. And remember, we added because we could find one or the other. Algebra, evaluate p minus q if p equals 5/6 and q equals 1/2. So there's our expression, p minus q. We're going to plug 5/6 in for p and 1/2 in for q. So our new expression is 5/6 minus 1/2. And then we need to find the least common denominator. 6 is a multiple of 2, so that is our least common denominator. And 5/6 is all set, so we can use the identity property, multiply that times 1. We do need to multiply the denominator 2 times 3 to get 6, so we'll multiply the numerator times 3 as well. And we get 5/6 minus 3/6. 5 minus 3 is 2, and we'll keep 6 in the denominator. So 2/6 can be simplified because 2 goes into 2 and 2 goes into 6. So if we divide each by 2, we get 1/3. There's your homework. Head on over to Google Classroom and complete that to submit it. And have a great day. Thank you.